Welcome to Adding Years, your roadmap to longevity, a playbook for living healthier and longer. I'm Josie. Along with being a certified personal trainer and longevity enthusiast, I am also a data and AI executive with 4 master's degrees, including one in AI from Johns Hopkins. In each episode, I'll share simple technology and AI-backed strategies with practical steps that you can use to build your own longevity roadmap. I'm not a doctor or medical professional, so be sure to check with your physician before trying anything we discuss on the show. 2025 was the year longevity science finally grew up, and it was messy, dramatic, and unforgettable. Unity Biotechnology, one of the early high-profile anti-aging startups, effectively collapsed in 2025. But at the same exact time, the first therapies designed to literally reverse cellular age, not slow aging, not patch it, but rewind it, announced that they're entering human trials in 2026. And AI discovered compounds that extended lifespan in animals by over 70%. And GLP1 drugs, yes, the one everyone jokingly still calls the shot your cousin used to lose weight, are now being openly discussed by scientists as the first population-level longevity drug. 2025 torched the old playbook and handed us something completely different, which brings us to 2026, the year longevity stops being theoretical. Today, I'm walking you through the 13 longevity predictions I believe will shape your health, the industry, and the next decade of aging science. Some of these predictions will sound bold, some will sound obvious once you hear the data, and at least one will probably make you laugh because it feels a little too much like science fiction, until you realize the groundwork has already happened last year. So let's jump into it. All right. Prediction 1, and this is the big one. 2026 is the first year we actually test whether we can make human tissue biologically younger. Not slower aging, not masking aging, I mean younger at the cellular level. Here's why I'm making this prediction. Last year, a company called Life Biosciences announced that their therapy called ER100 is slated to enter human trials as early as 2026 for glaucoma and optic neuropathies. If you followed aging science, you know that this is massive. ER100 uses partial epigenetic reprogramming, a technique used on the Yamanaka factors, but with one safety tweak. They removed the cancer risk factor, c-MYC, and kept the other 3, OCT4, SOX2, and KLF4. Think of these factors like a software reset button built into your DNA. As we age, our cells accumulate epigenetic noise, like corrupted files piling up on a laptop. Reprogramming basically tells the cell, hey, go back to the clean version of yourself, but just don't forget what type of cell you are. Back in 2020, this approach restored vision in mice with glaucoma. Not just slowed decline, but actually restored function in the damaged optic nerves. And in 2025, Life released preclinical data showing benefits not just in the eye, but in the liver, which hints at something even bigger. If you can safely rejuvenate cells in one tissue, you can theoretically rejuvenate others. And as you know, I'm not a scientist, so let's stay grounded. Is this guaranteed to work in humans? Probably not. And would I sign up for the very first trial? Not a chance. But could 2026 be the moment we see the first ever safety and efficacy signals in humans for actual biological rejuvenation? Yes. And if that happens, we're looking at what I call the iPhone moment of longevity, the point where a breakthrough stops being a paper in Nature and becomes a clinical reality. So what does this mean for you? In 2026, just watch. These are early stage trials, but by 2030, if the safety checks out, we may see reprogramming therapies expanding into conditions like early neurodegeneration, muscle decline, or even metabolic dysfunction. This is a prediction that I'm most excited about because it's the first one that fundamentally asks, What if aging isn't one big cliff, but a system we can actually reset? Prediction 2. By the end of 2026, GLP-1s will officially be talked about not just as a diabetes med, not just as a weight loss med, but as a longevity drug. And honestly, it's already happening. Here's why I'm making this prediction. In 2025, one of the world's largest reinsurers, Swiss Re, published projections showing that widespread GLP-1 adoption could reduce all-cause mortality by around 6% in the US and over 5% in the UK. That is a population-level impact. That's a seatbelt level impact. That's a smoking cessation level impact. But here's the twist that got buried in the headlines. September 2025 mouse studies showed rejuvenation effects from GLP-1s even when there was no weight loss. That means something deeper is happening. So let's make this simple. Think of GLP-1s as drugs that quiet chronic inflammation, rebalance metabolic signaling, and take pressure off of the body's aging system. It's not magic, it's reducing the metabolic chaos that drives premature aging. And in humans, we're already seeing the benefits in cardiovascular system, kidneys, liver, and possibly even protection against Alzheimer's. Now combine that with triple agonists like retatrutide on track to complete phase 3, more affordable alternatives arriving in 2026, including high-quality compounded versions and earlier generation GLP-1 formulations, bringing monthly costs down to about $70 to $100 in some markets. Big Pharma increasingly framing these as longevity therapeutics at scientific conferences, and insurers getting nervous about paying for lifelong prescriptions. And you get this prediction. Insurers will likely start requiring strength training or muscle preservation metrics as a condition for GLP-1 coverage. Because here's the unsexy truth. GLP-1s definitely reduce appetite, but they don't preserve muscle. And muscle preservation is critical for long-term aging outcomes. So what does this mean for you? If you're on a GLP-1 or thinking about it, 2026 is the year you pair it with resistance training, adequate protein, regular strength tracking, and a focus on preserving VO2 max. Because the real power of GLP-1s isn't looking smaller. It's taking metabolic strain off of your body so that your heart, brain, and organs can age slower. And I do think by December of 2026, you're going to see official statements calling them longevity therapeutics. It's already happening and we're just catching up. Prediction number 3 is about a shift that I think is going to feel almost spooky at first, but by the end of 2026, it's going to feel obvious. Measuring the biological age of your brain and immune system will become as normal as checking your cholesterol. And let me tell you why. In late 2025, a massive Nature Medicine analysis showed something that honestly should have been front page news everywhere. People whose brain age and immune age were biologically younger had dramatically lower mortality risk, regardless of their genetics, their BMI, or even their cholesterol. And here's the wild part. A young brain plus a young immune system equaled around half the 15-year mortality risk. And a biologically young brain alone equaled about several-fold lower Alzheimer's risk, even if you have high genetic risk. And these two markers predicted longevity better than BMI, fasting glucose, or LDL. And this is where I pause and will put my AI hat on. What these models are really measuring is how well your systems are communicating. Your brain and your immune system are constantly talking to each other through inflammation, sleep patterns, nutrient sensing, stress hormones, and even your gut microbiome. When that communication breaks down, aging accelerates. So think of brain age and immune age as your inflammation score, your stress score, and your resilience score hidden inside one number. So here's my prediction. You're going to see testing companies in 2026 offering accessible versions of these metrics, with MRI-derived brain age models, immune methylation clocks, and multi-omics reports becoming mainstream. Not because it's trendy, but because they're actionable. If your brain age is high, that points you towards sleep, cardio fitness, glucose control, cognitive training, and stress management. And if your immune age is high, you look at inflammation, strength training, nutrition, chronic stress, and visceral fat. And if both are high, well, that becomes your personal longevity roadmap. And here's my favorite part. This shift moves us away from the generic what's your biological age vanity test and toward a organ-specific aging, which is so much more useful because your body is not aging at one speed, it's aging at multiple speeds. And 2026 is the year we finally start measuring the ones that matter most. Prediction number 4, 2026 is the year Senolytics get boring and in a good way. Let me explain what I mean by that. Senolytics were supposed to be one of the first true anti-aging breakthroughs. These drugs target senescent cells, the cranky, inflamed, dysfunctional cells that refuse to die and instead yell at all their neighbors. Think of them as tiny cellular trolls. Back in 2018 to 2020, this buzz was huge. A startup called Unity Biotechnology raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They had celebrity investors like Jeff Bezos and Peter Thiel. Some people thought we were 5 years away from senolytic pills being sold at CVS next to the vitamin C. And then 2025 happened. Unity went from a $700 million biotechnology darling to effectively collapsing. They laid off their entire workforce, ceased clinical operations, and became what the industry calls a public shell. Their lead drug for knee osteoarthritis, UBX0101, failed phase 2 in 2020. Then their eye drug, UBX1325, technically missed its primary endpoint, though by a very narrow margin at weeks 20 to 24, even hitting non-inferiority at week 24 and week 36. But in biotech, technically missing the primary endpoint means no FDA approval. And without approval, the funding dried up, clinical trials stopped, and the company essentially vaporized. Unity went from the symbol of the future to a cautionary tale. So does that mean Senolytics are dead? Not at all. This is why I'm predicting a hype hangover, not a funeral. The NIA-funded trials using dasatinib and quercetin showed modest, real improvements in bone health in older women. St. Jude is running head-to-head trials of dasatinib and quercetin versus fisetin. Washington University is testing Senolytics in early Alzheimer's, and the NIH is studying them in people aging with HIV to improve frailty and function. And notice this, these trials aren't testing reverse aging. They're looking at gait speed, cognition, inflammation, immune resilience, the functional endpoints. And this is the reset Senolytics needed. Here's what my research says about what likely went wrong with Unity. They focused on local administration, injecting drugs into one knee or one eye. But senescent cells are like bad roommates screaming at the whole house, not just one room. Treating only the knee was never going to quiet the systemic inflammation driving aging. Here's my prediction. Senolytics will reemerge in 2026 as targeted condition-specific tools, not miracle pills. Think osteoarthritis, frailty, early cognitive decline, and immune aging. Small wins that matter, not sexy, but real. This is one of those moments where longevity science stops acting like Silicon Valley and starts acting like medicine. Prediction number 5. Rapamycin has been part of the longevity conversation for more than a decade, but 2026 is the year it finally reaches a fork in the road. On one side, legitimacy. On the other, backlash. And which path it takes depends entirely on how seriously we treat the data. So let's start with what actually changed. The Pearl trial, participatory evaluation of aging with rapamycin for longevity, was the first reasonably large structured placebo-controlled human study designed specifically to look at rapamycin in generally healthy older adults. Its initial results first became public as a preprint in August 2024, and then the peer-reviewed publication published on April 2025. Remember this bit because the timeline matters. Because Pearl didn't prove that rapamycin extends human lifespan, It didn't show dramatic rejuvenation, but what it did do was something far more important for the field. It demonstrated that weekly low-dose rapamycin could be used for about a year with an acceptable safety profile under structured conditions, and it produced early signals in health span-related markers that justified further study. For the first time, rapamycin moved out of the realm of self-experimentation and into something that looks like cautious medicine. At the same time, the narrative around rapamycin took a sharp turn. In September 2024, Brian Johnson, one of the most visible figures in the longevity space, made the decision to stop taking rapamycin after nearly 5 years of use. He announced this publicly in November 2024, and his reasons weren't theoretical. They were practical: recurrent infections, metabolic side effects, and a growing sense that, for him, the risk-benefit equation no longer made sense. And that moment landed hard in the public conversation, not because it proved rapamycin is dangerous, but because it exposed a core tension in longevity medicine. A drug can be biologically promising and still wrong for a given person, dose, or context. And in 2025, academic medicine started saying the quiet part out loud. A major review published in June 2025 in Frontiers in Aging raised concern about the rise of online longevity clinics prescribing rapamycin with minimal oversight, often without standardized protocols, consistent monitoring, or clear long-term safety data. The concern wasn't rapamycin itself. It was how casually it was being deployed. So here's the fork. In one direction, rapamycin becomes a legitimate, narrowly used longevity tool, prescribed conservatively, monitored carefully, studied rigorously, and limited to people where the biology actually supports its use. In the other direction, it gets swept up in hype, overprescribed, under-monitored, and ultimately constrained by regulators reacting to misuse rather than science. So my prediction for 2026 is this: the DIY era of rapamycin begins to close. What survives will be lower intermittent dosing, clear inclusion criteria, routine monitoring for infection risk, lipids, glucose, and muscle health, and an explicit understanding that rapamycin is not a supplement. It's an immunomodulatory drug. And that's not a loss for longevity. It's a maturation. Because if rapamycin has a future in human aging, it will be used as a tool with restraint, data, and medical supervision, not as a badge of biohacker credibility. 2026 probably won't tell us whether rapamycin works in the way that people want it to, but it will decide whether it becomes a part of real medicine or a cautionary chapter in the history of longevity hype. Prediction number 6. In 2026, your muscle strength will matter more to your doctor than your weight. Here's why I'm making this prediction. In 2025, multiple large cohort studies all came to the same conclusion. Grip strength and muscle mass predict mortality better than BMI, cholesterol, fasting glucose, and blood pressure. And that's wild. Let's break down what strength really represents. Your muscle is not about just lifting things. Muscle is a metabolic organ that regulates glucose, a hormone factory producing anti-aging signals, your first line of defense against frailty, a shock absorber for inflammation and aging, and the scaffolding that holds your entire system stable. So when you lose muscle, your whole system loses stability, literally and metabolically. So in 2026, here's what I think you'll see. The first would be doctors shifting from BMI to strength metrics. BMI has been a blunt, outdated tool for decades. But for example, grip strength seems to predict longevity, disability risk, independence in older age, cognitive decline, and hospitalization risk. Strength is becoming the new vital sign. And second, insurance companies will care more about muscle preservation, especially with GLP1s going mainstream. If people lose weight and muscle, we have a long-term massive health problem. If people preserve muscle, we have a longevity win. Expect VO2 max targets, grip strength benchmarks, and even resistant training prescriptions. And lastly, and thank God, is the death of the skinny longevity myth. The old model of longevity was eat less, weigh less, and stress your systems less. The new model is stay strong, stay capable, and stay metabolically resilient. If aging is slow erosion, muscle is your scaffolding. Lose your scaffolding and everything collapses faster. So what does all of this mean for you? In essence, if you want to age well, you need 2 days a week of resistance training minimum, ingestion of adequate protein, 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, and a movement routine that challenges your muscles regularly. And that's your baseline longevity prescription. Because in 2026, strength isn't going to be optional. It's going to be the currency, and it's the currency that buys you more healthy years. My 7th prediction is that 2026 is the year AI-designed longevity drugs move out of the lab and into human trials. Let's look at 2025 for a second. Scripps Research published results from an AI-driven drug discovery pipeline where over 70% of the compounds the AI generated extended lifespan in a popular model organism, C. elegans, and one boosted lifespan by 74%. For context, most human-designed compounds don't come anywhere close to that hit rate. We also saw in silico medicine go public in Hong Kong in the largest biotech IPO of 2025, with their first AI-designed drug entering phase 2A. Chai Discovery also hit a 1.3 valuation for a zero-shot antibody generation, and Medra raised $52 million to build robot scientists that run experiments 24/7. This isn't hype anymore, this is pipeline acceleration. And here's the simplest way to think about it. AI shrinks the time between idea and the first human trial from a decade to maybe 3 or 4 years. Instead of one scientist testing one molecule at a time, AI tests millions of possibilities in silico, which is a fancy way of saying experiments performed on a computer or via computer simulation software. Ranks them, predicts toxicity, predicts binding affinity, and then hands the best candidates to automated labs for real-world testing. It's basically evolution, but on 10x speed with fewer bad mutations. So here's my prediction for 2026. At least one AI-discovered molecule targeting aging pathways will enter human trials. And I'll even go further and say that the majority of them fail, but that will be the progress that we need. Because in AI drug discovery, failure is data, and data is acceleration. Every failed molecule sharpens the model, and every successful mechanisms will get replicated thousands of times over. And what does this all mean? It means that we're living through a shift where AI is generating drug candidates, robots are running experiments, models are iterated in real time, and human scientists are validating the best ideas. Think of it as the ChatGPT moment for drug development. We're entering a world where longevity drugs don't just react to diseases, they're designed by algorithms to target aging pathways directly. 2026 probably won't give us the miracle pill, but it will give us the pipeline that leads to it. Prediction number 8. 2026 will be the year mitochondrial therapies step into the center of the longevity conversation. And the molecule everybody will be watching? MOTS-c. Let me explain why. For decades, mitochondria were treated like background characters, the little powerhouses of the cell that dutifully made energy and didn't ask for attention. Then 2025 happened. A December study showed that improving mitochondrial supercomplex efficiency in mice not only boosted lifespan, but improved metabolic health, muscle function, immune resilience, and even inflammatory profiles. And this wasn't subtle. These were whole system improvements that look like the biology of younger animals. And it suddenly made the entire field look up and say, wait, mitochondria aren't the background. They're the control room. And now enter MOTS-c, the mitochondrial peptide that's been floating around the edges of longevity for a few years. Early human trials, small but promising, showed better insulin sensitivity, improved exercise capacity, favorable metabolic markers, and some mild side effects, mostly injection site reactions and occasional flu-like symptoms in early trials, and effects that look strikingly similar to what we want in aging therapies. The problem is that we yet don't have a large long-term human study, and we don't fully understand dosing, and we don't know the safety at multi-year scale. So here's my 2026 prediction. MOTS-C will start becoming the litmus test for the entire mitochondrial therapy field. If larger trials show strong metabolic or functional benefits, mitochondrial peptides will most definitely explode. If the results are modest or inconsistent, I think the field will recalibrate. It doesn't go away because the biology still makes sense. Let me put this simply. If aging is partly an energy crisis, then mitochondrial therapies are attempts to reboot the battery at the cellular level. Strength declines, fatigue, chronic low-grade inflammation, metabolic slowdown, these are all tied to mitochondrial dysfunction. You fix the power grid and the whole city runs better. So what does this mean for you in 2026? This is a watch and wait category. Do not jump into mitochondrial peptides unless you're in a clinical setting. The safety data just isn't mature yet. But make sure you pay attention because mitochondrial signaling might end up being as important as GLP-1 pathways and maybe even more. And MOTS-C, that's the canary in the coal mine. It will tell us whether mitochondria-based longevity therapies are the next GLP-1s or just the next overhyped supplement. Prediction number 9. 2026 is the year longevity clinics stop acting like wellness spas and start being treated like medical practices. And honestly, it's about time. And let me explain why I'm making this prediction. The last few years have been a boom in longevity clinics. They're everywhere now, from LA to Dubai to London, offering everything from rapamycin and peptides to hyperbaric oxygen, stem cells, methylation panels, NAD drips, and quote, optimal aging protocols. Some are legitimate, some are, let's call them ambitious, and some are borderline dangerous. In 2025, a longevity clinics world directory went live, basically mapping out the global explosion of these clinics like they were trendy coffee shops. And at the same time, academic journals started sounding alarms that these clinics have too little oversight, too much off-label prescribing, no standardized biomarker panels, no defined dosing protocols, no follow-up safety monitoring, and wild variability in clinician training. And when you combine that with rising interest in rapamycin, peptides, and even gene therapies, regulators do what regulators do. They start paying attention. Here's what I think will happen in 2026. First, I think the FDA and the EMA will begin defining aging-related indications indirectly. They won't specifically say we're regulating aging. They will say frailty, immune aging, sarcopenia, multimorbidity are some of the footholds that they start regulating. Second is that I think that states will tighten rules around off-label prescribing, especially around rapamycin, growth hormone secretagogues, mitochondrial peptides, and unsupervised peptide stacks. I'm not claiming that they'll ban them, but probably put in more guardrails. And third, clinics will need standardized protocols. Expect requirements from clinics like pre-treatment blood panels, infection risk assessment, muscle preservation metrics, metabolic screening, structured dosing, follow-up intervals, and documentation for peptides. Basically, if you act like a medical practice, you need to be overseen like one. And what does that mean for you? Well, thankfully, longevity clinics won't disappear, but the Wild West era, that's closing. And the upside is huge. We'll get safer protocols, better outcomes, and actual data that can drive the entire field forward. Because longevity isn't a vibe, it's a medical discipline. And 2026 is when it finally starts being treated like one. Prediction number 10. 2026 is the year longevity stops looking like 1,000 tiny startups and starts looking like a handful of mega platform bets. If 2025 was a year of hype cycles, celebrity investors, and flashy seed rounds, then 2026 is the year the industry gets serious. And by serious, I mean expensive. Here's one of the signals that matter most. The 101 million X Prize health span competition selected 100 semifinalists and 40 milestone winners. All of them are now funded to run interventions that aim to rejuvenate muscle, cognition, and immunity by 10 to 20 biological years. That is not a small goal. That's a moonshot. And here's the thing about the X Prize. Results take years to validate, but 2026 is when we'll start seeing preliminary data from these teams. Maybe not the final validations, but enough of a signal to shift the conversation. Now layer on Retro Biosciences, which is Sam Altman, who is a founder of OpenAI's company, raising close to $1 billion, one of the largest private raises in longevity biotech history, their plans for AI-driven rejuvenation therapeutics, the upcoming trials targeting Alzheimer's and blood-brain rejuvenation, and billion-dollar partnerships forming around AI drug platforms like Jiro and Chugai. And with these trends, the picture becomes clear. The longevity field is consolidating, and this is because the science finally demands scale. Epigenetic reprogramming isn't a 3 million seed round project. Mitochondrial therapeutics aren't built in co-working labs. AI drug discovery needs compute, robotics, and datasets that only the top-tier players can afford. So here's my 2026 prediction. At least one X Prize team will release preliminary data this year that generates serious attention. Maybe not final validation, but of enough of a signal, maybe some improved gait speed, cognitive function, immune resilience, enough to make people say, oh, this is working. And I also predict 2 or 3 heavily funded longevity platforms quietly shutting down or pivoting when the early data disappoints, just like Unity. And like I mentioned before, that's a good thing. Science isn't supposed to reward hype. It's supposed to reward results. So what does this mean for you? Longevity is becoming a real industry with real money, real science, and real accountability. The winners will be the ones who combine the mechanistic rigor, clinical trial maturity, AI acceleration, and clear pathways to patient outcomes. The era of cool idea, cute mouse study is ending. 2026 is the year longevity becomes a major sector, the next biotech frontier. And last but not least, my prediction number 11. And honestly, this is the one that will tie everything together. 2026 is the year longevity science gets boring. And that's actually the best news of all. Let me explain. For the last couple of years, I think that we've gotten used to seeing a couple scenarios. Scenario 1 would be something of a cinematic breakthrough in mice where scientists are claiming reversed aging or reversed memory or that they could make cells young again. And maybe in scenario 2, we're seeing Instagram biohackers stacking 17 untested supplements while sitting in an ice bath. But 2025 really changed the math. We got real failures, like Unity Biotechnology collapsing, and we got real maturation, like GLP1s proving population scale mortality impact. We got real pathways, like epigenetic reprogramming entering human trials. We got real metrics, our brain age, immune age, VO2 max, and strength. And we got real AI pipelines, speeding drug discovery from years to months. And all of that sets the stage for 2026 to be the year longevity quietly moves from a future fantasy to a clinical reality. And here's the twist. Clinical reality isn't flashy. It's structured, it's slow, it's methodical, it's boring. It's gait speed measurements, it's grip strength tests, it's immune resilience panels, it's VO2 max training sessions. It's take your protein seriously, it's checking inflammation markers, it's controlled dosing, not mega dosing, and it's AI models refining trial endpoints instead of making dramatic headlines. It's the opposite of the sensationalism that defined the early longevity movement. And I personally love this shift. Because boring is where medicine lives, and boring is where progress happens, and boring is what turns breakthroughs into standards of care. Here's the realistic future. We're probably not getting 200-year lifespans. We're probably not uploading our minds. We're not going to become ageless superheroes. But we are on track, realistically, to add 5 to 15 healthy years to the lives of people who take longevity seriously. Not hypothetical years, not pie in the sky years, actual years. Years with strength, mobility, cognition, and purpose. And when you stack the interventions that actually work, like the metabolic therapies, muscle preservation, mitochondrial health, sleep optimization, GLPs where appropriate, inflammation control, early detection, and personalized aging metrics, we're inching towards something remarkable, which is the compression of morbidity. So what does this mean for you? If you look around right now, longevity might feel like a mix of hype, hope, and hesitancy. But in 2026, it becomes a healthcare discipline, predictable, measurable, actionable, and boring in the best possible way. Because boring means it's gonna work. And that brings us to the most important part of the episode. Based on these predictions, what can you actually do in 2026? I'm going to break this into 3 simple tiers. Think of it as a personal longevity roadmap. No hype, no fluff, just the things that actually move the needle. Tier 1, I'd classify it as do this now. These are evidence-backed behaviors that extend health span in almost everyone. Resistance training 2 times a week minimum, trying to get in 7 to 10,000 steps daily, 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein consumed in a day, 7 to 9 hours of sleep with consistent sleep time and wake up time, and purposeful social connections. These 5 behaviors alone can add 5 to 10 healthy years for most people. Tier 2 are things that you should be measuring. My favorite thing that I say in my day-to-day job is you can't manage what you can't measure. So here are some of the things that you should be tracking. First is your grip strength, your VO2 max, and your zone 2 proxies, your biological age, but really with validated clocks only. My research shows that companies like True Age and Generation Lab are some of the best tests you can get out there at the moment. Your HSCRP and metabolic panel, and lastly, your body composition, including your muscle mass and visceral fat. In 2026, your metrics should become your map. Tier 3, I call the frontier. This is where longevity gets interesting and where you need to be the most careful. These aren't ready for DIY experimentation. The question is, under what condition might this make sense for you? So let me break this into 3 further categories: try with supervision, consider with caution, and watch only. 2 things that maybe you can try with medical supervision. First is GLP1s. I think this is worth considering that the population level mortality data is real, and it shows around a 6% projected reduction in US all-cause mortality. But again, make sure that this is under medical supervision, you're getting sufficient protein, you're getting your resistance training in, you're tracking your body composition, and you're on the lowest effective dose. Another one that I would put in this category would be rapamycin under very structured protocols. Why I think this is a consideration is because the Pearl trial gave us first solid human safety data, and we know that low-dose intermittent use showed acceptable safety over 1 year. But again, make sure that you're under medical supervision, you're getting regular lipid, glucose, and immune panels, you're tracking your muscles, and you're in a conservative dosing schedule with a clear discontinuation plan if side effects do emerge. The second category is classified as consider with caution because we are seeing some emerging evidence. I would put mitochondrial peptides like MOTS-c in this category. Early human data is showing improved insulin sensitivity and exercise capacity And again, like we mentioned earlier, the biological mechanism is sound. But again, what's really missing is that large-scale safety data, the standardized dosing understanding, and what the long-term outcomes are. When you're considering this route, make sure that you're working with a physician with peptide expertise and you are sourcing pharmaceutical-grade peptides. The last category is watch only, and probably watch only we can do because most of these are not ready for human use outside of trials. The first is epigenetic reprogramming. This is at the frontier of cellular regeneration. A lot of them are in phase 1 only. We haven't really seen peer-reviewed efficacy data as of this recording, and there still is a potential cancer risk if it's done wrong. By watching this in 2026, we'll learn if partial reprogramming is safe in humans and whether or not we'll see efficacy signals. The second in this category is going to be AI-discovered longevity molecules. As mentioned earlier, these are showing unprecedented hit rates. So it's going to be really interesting to watch them to understand kind of the same thing as the epigenetic reprogramming, which is, do they show any human efficacy? And then most importantly, can AI actually shortcut drug development timelines? And a little bonus section, these are things that I would just skip entirely. First is unregulated peptide stacks. The risk to benefit ratio in 2026 isn't there yet. Wait for proper trials or be sure to have a well-versed physician working with you doing the proper testing. Next would be overpriced and unvalidated aging clocks. If the website looks like a crypto ad, the science probably isn't there yet. And if you do use them just for tracking and trends, not as a badge of honor. Next would be longevity clinics without obvious medical oversight. Without that accountability, you're a guinea pig, not a patient. So make sure you ask who's prescribing, who's monitoring, and most importantly, who's liable. And lastly, this might be a really obvious one, but anything promising 20 years of extra life. The science doesn't support it yet, and it undermines legitimate longevity work. In short, don't do anything without a clear goal, a way to test, and a competent medical doctor who can partner with you. A good example is fisetin and clearing senescent cells. There is some evidence this works, but say for example you are on blood thinners or low-dose aspirin. It can potentially cause problems. And your average supplement company won't be able to tell you that, but a good doctor would hopefully be able to identify these risks. So here we are, 11 predictions later, standing at the edge of a year that feels different. Not because it's filled with sci-fi breakthroughs, and not because we suddenly discovered the fountain of youth, but because for the first time, longevity science and longevity practice are finally meeting in the middle. 2026 isn't the year we become ageless. It's the year aging becomes understandable, trackable, and influenceable. That's why I'm so optimistic, because the future of longevity isn't going to be built on hype cycles or headlines. It's going to be built on habits, data, careful progress, and just enough bold science to move the frontier forward without losing safety or sanity along the way. So let's bring this home. If you want to add years to your life in 2026, build strength like it's your retirement plan. Move your body every day. Sleep like tomorrow's energy depends on it. Keep your inflammation low and your glucose stable. Pay attention to your metrics. Stay curious about the breakthroughs, but be thoughtful about what you adopt. Because here's the truth behind all 11 predictions. The boring stuff works, and the exciting stuff is finally starting to become real. And the combination of those two things, the habits you practice and the science you follow, might not just add years to your life, but life to your years. We'll revisit all of these predictions in December 2026 and see how I did. And I genuinely can't wait, because watching this field evolve is one of the most hopeful, energizing things I've ever been a part of. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about your future self. And thank you for being part of this journey. Thank you for spending your time with me today on Adding Years, your roadmap to longevity. If you found this episode helpful, please follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and consider leaving a review. Before we wrap up, a quick but important reminder. Adding years is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your physician or qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your health regimen, supplements, or exercise routine. What you hear on this show reflects personal opinions, experiences, and not medical advice. I'm Josie, and this is Adding Years. Until next time, here's to living better, longer.